You've likely heard this before. Movies are divided into two opposite extremes, realism and formalism. Realist films supposedly show reality as is, raw and unmanipulated, while formalist films create their own reality that's strange, fantastic, and sometimes perplexing. These poles make up a spectrum, and in their middle we find Classicism, which applies to most mainstream movies. Films that present a plausible universe but use control techniques like music, editing, and dramatic lighting to elevate reality. Nice and all, but today I'm gonna talk about this pole, the formalist side. The unrealistic films that throw away the limitations of nature and fully flaunt artistry, weirdness, and creativity. But first I want to clarify something about the word formalism. It's not the same as formalist film theory, that being my method of film analysis, which is the dissection of film based on formal and stylistic aspects, shots, sets, and such. The term formalism simply evolves from this approach to literature and film to include those movies that make their form evident. That's why films that call attention to formal aspects like montage and cinematography became known as formalist films. Meaning I'm a formalist talking about formalism and those words don't refer to the same thing. That's one term in cinema studies with two distinct meanings, not confusing at all. Just like this, classicism here is not necessarily related to classical films, though they are included, but films in general that follow mainstream norms, regardless of their time. We need more words, movie people! Words! Now let's gallivant through the wonderful world of formalist films. Formalist film was born with Georges Méliès. His extravagant sets and costumes, use of illusionism and effects proved that cinema could be something more than the simple recreation of real life. Later came German Expressionism and its striking shadows and distortions. Horror films get all the praise, but everybody's favorite Ernst Lubitsch was working right then and there making his own expressionistic comedies. Crazy sets could also be built for laughs. Expressionism cemented something that would forever be a trait of formalism: artificiality. These films don't hide the fact they're man-made creations, they embrace it. In the Soviet Union, directors called attention to the artifice of filmmaking through montage. The fact that non-continuity editing was once viewed as formalistic raises the most complicated aspect of this side of cinema. It depends on audience perception and the release year. By that I mean that something that is deemed formalistic today may not have been in another era, and something that was once formalistic may not be so today. It's the norms of the time that define what counts. Nowadays we're used to fast cuts and fantastical sets, meaning that a fast cut film in a fantasy world is not formalistic, even if it would have been in the past. You can watch a whole film in such a style without ever considering anything out of the ordinary. We are no longer used to obvious rear projections and matte paintings, meaning that if a film used them today it would be deemed, up to a point, formalistic. All that matters is the question, is it weird? Guy Maddin, using the language of silent cinema, is one of the most consistent formalist filmmakers today, even if in earlier times his films would have been normal. In style, I mean. Sometimes. What's up with Winnipeg anyway? As the Bible says, one dream does not a formalist film make. It's apocryphal, don't check. But many classically oriented films find ways to include formalist traits in one scene or another, mostly through character subjectivity, imagination and dreams. James Ivory's Surviving Picasso has a flashback set in proudly fake cubist sets, standing out from the rest of this otherwise classical-looking movie. Narrative excuses like dreams, plays and fantasies are constantly used to make formalism make sense, by keeping your suspension of disbelief. But I defend that full formalism keeps you in disbelief. There exists one particular genre that made formalism a major part of its aesthetic. And it's not fantasy or science fiction, they don't count anymore. We're too used to them. They're cases where unrealism fits their universe. The most formalistic of all genres is the musical. Musical numbers are often justified by happening on stage or inside a character's mind. But it's still a genre built out of being opposite to realism. A genre that elevates spectacle and imagination. The movie musical evolved from the opera and the operetta. operas being described by Wagner as the synthesis of all the arts. Revealing the greatness of music, architecture, painting and performance, the musical is the logical next step. And in all of Hollywood history, never was there a more successful formalist director than Vincent Minnelli. His MGM musicals produced by Arthur Freed were the most otherworldly to ever come out of a major studio. Britain meanwhile had the Archers, Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, who made the most colorful and visually sumptuous productions ever to come out of Europe. Of course, the first director to bring formalism to the movie musical was Busby Berkeley, with his dreamy, kaleidoscopic interludes. He's the one who influenced that famous dream scene from The Big Lebowski. Also Ken Russell, the maddest and loudest of British formalists. His histrionic, madcap world is usually justified by taking place inside dreams or on the stage, if not both. The more films Reina-Vena Fassbinder made and he was cinema's consummate speedrunner, the more formalistic tendencies he indulged, especially through garish lighting, but always realistically justified by the film's locations. The epilogue of his Berlin Alexanderplatz takes advantage of being a crazy hallucination to go for the most excessive of mannerist excess. But his final film, Carel, was pure formalism through and through. It's the only one that never justifies its abandonment of reality. It is fully set in a world with openly fake backgrounds and Freudian architecture. In a similar case, forsaking the neo-realist tendencies that started his career,
Laboratori!
Federico Fellini fluidly flirted with formalism, making a dreamy film, then a dreamy film in vivid color, then full formalism with Satyricon, called by some a sci-fi film set in the past. He went even further with Fellini's Casanova. What a coincidence, Fellini directing Fellini's Satyricon and Fellini's Casanova, which is so beautifully artificial its ocean is presented like this. Even Fellini's classical-looking And the Ship Sails On concludes by revealing the machinery of film, pulling away the rug of realism. Speaking of fake ships, Moroccan director Mad Hondo set his brilliant West Indies in a slave ship placed inside an unused factory. And the film is a musical. At this point, why not, right? Formalists like to keep the fourth wall visible. Just check the jolly musical comedy western Red Garters. Like in a minimalist stage play, the sets simply suggest you have to on your imaginary forces work. The same idea was used in Dogville, which has no sets at all, only chalk lines on the ground. Lars von Trier had Brechtian influences, but there's no way I'm sidetracking to Brecht's theory of dialectical theater, whose intention is not suspending disbelief but making the audience active participants through alienation effects, and how all this can clearly be related to the most extreme specimens of formalist cinema, which basically achieve the same result. No way I'm talking about that. But since Bert is on the table, there's this excellent adaptation of his excellent play Galileo, by Joseph Losey, and it includes, besides occasional musical narration, one formalistic scene where the actors have their shadows cast on the white background canvas. A wonderful moment that shows how a minimal set can be used creatively if artists wait. Their shadows don't touch other actors? How? Shouldn't you see the shadow covering the person who's behind? Oh, they're not cast shadows, it's a rear projection. You can see the shadows don't even come from the actors. No way, their movements are in perfect sync. They are getting cast by the actors. How is it they don't occlude other actors? Fill lights on the sides and up? How strong could they be? You don't even see a shadow of a shadow on their faces. Oh my god, how? Back to Trier, earlier in his career he made Europa, a terrific exercise in full formalism, with finely crafted images, rich in rear projections. Then he immediately ditched that spotless style in favor of crappy-looking handheld junk. Oh well. He still occasionally adds formalistic shots in slow motion into his films, but they feel more like snippets of video clips than movie moments. Dogville contains an artificial, formalistic setting that's shot with ultra-realist pseudo-documentary camera work, showing how, curiously, form and style don't always align. In fact, most formalistic pictures are formalistic in form alone, but not in style, adhering to realistic or mostly classic norms. Take Joe Wright's Anna Karenina, presented as a dazzling stage play, but once we're done with showy tracking shots, it's blocked and filmed just like any other conventional movie. Or Julie Taymor's Titus, set in an anachronistic, dare I say Fellini-esque, Rome of old, but with the exception of a couple trippy visions, it looks just like any other conventional movie. Finding a style that's as strange as the form is rare, but it has been done. In Ivan the Terrible, Eisenstein, who amended Wagner by calling cinema the new synthesis of the arts, gives us strange sets and stranger staging. His actors speak dialogue not to each other, but to us? They don't behave in plausible human ways, but striking poses and dramatically approaching the camera. Formalist staging. Another director with a bizarre approach to blocking is Manuel de Oliveira, who loved to have his actors facing forward, stiff. His most formalistic film was The Satin Slipper, perhaps the greatest film I would recommend to absolutely nobody.
Et croyez-vous que j'ai une raison si forte de l'aimer quand c'est à lui que je dois d'être votre femme?
Il est vrai, laissez-moi méditer sur ce texte un petit moment.
Il ne m'aime pas.
A 7-hour-long stagey volley of beautiful, difficult dialogue that opens as a stage play and closes as a movie. One of the boldest, most uncompromising works of cinematic artificiality. And it's got so much talking even the moon speaks.
C'est là du moins lui et moi une chose que nous pouvons partager. C'est jamais qu'il a appris de ma bouche dans ce baiser tout à l'heure en qui nous avons été faits un seul. Jamais.
Now Peter Greenaway, my favorite formalist. The influence of paintings gives his films stylized sets, costumes and lighting. The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover being his masterpiece. That film is famous for its completely singular use of color. Each location has one predominant hue. Parking lot, blue. The kitchen, green. The restaurant, red. Restrooms, white. And every time a character goes from one to the other, their costume changes colors. Still on the subject of formalistic staging, Greenaway tends to position his actors like figures in a painting, and we get closer through axial cuts. The axial cut was one of Eisenstein's favorite techniques, but Greenaway does it like an art book, giving us detailed views. Soon, one shot at a time wasn't enough for Peter, and from Prospero's books forward he began to place frames on top of each other. Prospero's books is already the most visually excessive film ever made since Joseph von Sternberg, but it goes beyond our previous notion of excess by superimposing images on top of images on top of images.
Bosun! Bosun! Bosun!
In our post-MTV age of social media and viral videos, crazy editing seldom comes off as formalistic. We're so used to everything, but Greenaway is an odd man out.
We are pretty certain that they don't fuck.
Make love.
Sleep together. Copulate.
Oh, what does that mean?
It's the same, but no frills.
A film like Robert Zemeckis' Here is an unexpected case of mainstream formalism, even more unexpected by achieving it through editing. Oliver Stone's JFK barely counts as formalism today, but his Natural-Born Killers definitely does. With its psychedelic, video clippy everything and the kitchen sink and a woolly mammoth approach. Using loony lighting, color, texture, rear projections, it clearly takes place in a world opposed to realism. Since I mentioned rear projections again, they feature predominantly in the avant-garde films of Hans-Jürgen Syberberg, his most famous being Hitler, a film from Germany, a 7-hour-long experimental endurance test I had the inhumanity to unleash upon myself. Don't try this one at home, okay? Rear projections, puppetry, staginess, and oh so much symbolism. Here's another common aspect of formalism: anachronism. You find it throughout Titus, in a deleted scene from the draftsman's contract, and all over the films of Derek Jarman, yet another British formalist.
I know this film studio is in Waterloo.
A big fan of unlit backgrounds, as was common in silent Soviet films, and the paintings of Caravaggio. Hey, would you look at that? That's the part of the video where I ask you to like and subscribe! And even better, to join me on Patreon! By now it's evident how formalistic films have a flair for the theatrical.
I'm afraid the staging left a little to be desired. On the contrary, I found it extremely stagey.
What can be more clearly artificial than clearly artificial sets and locations? When that most discreet of directors Eric Rohmer cut his teeth on formalism, he made Perceval le Gallois, with a synthetic theatrical world to tell the weirdest Camelot film you've ever seen. And yes, they sing. Stop singing, you formalists! Francis Ford Coppola has been flirting with formalism for most of his career. Using techniques from silent cinema, his Dracula was his most successful endeavor. One from the Heart was even more formalistic, displaying artificiality in cinematography, production design, and even staging.
Little boy blues, little puppy.
So joyfully theatrical that it opens and closes with curtains, as does The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, and as does Rushmore. Today there is no more famous formalist filmmaker than Wes Anderson. His illustrated storybook aesthetic has already been studied and explained by everyone everywhere. No need to repeat. So how about formalists from Japan? There were Seijun Suzuki's colorful, highly stylized pistol operas. That's the name of the movie. But the maddest of Japanese formalists was Nobuhiko Obayashi, famous for the cult classic Howl. His films are uncanny. Like artworks from outer space made by an enthusiastic alien who's heard in passage about what movies maybe look like. They're melodramatic, bizarrely cut, fake and happy to be fake. His final romps are long and, I must say, quite exhausting. They show the power that CGI can have to be weird. Obayashi's effects sometimes look rather uncouth, but they make up for it with zest. CGI has been seldom used to create formalism. People only want imaginary worlds presented realistically. Just a few comic book adaptations like Sin City and 300 took the formalistic route. Or Patrick Willems' favorite, Speed Racer. And of course, Coppola's Megalopolis, a grandly formalistic frolic, unnatural in setting, visuals, editing and internal logic. A grandly formalistic frolic.
That basically is a utopia.
People were somehow expecting a normal movie when every little thing on screen was howling formalism, formalism. We might as well criticize The Color of Pomegranates for having no solid narrative. All these movies reveal the possibilities of filmic formalism in different levels, from diegetic excuses for strangeness to fully strange presentations in every way. But what would be the extreme pole of this side of cinema? Full formalism. Just like the extreme, unquestionable side of realism would be real-life surveillance footage, absolute formalism would most likely have to be animation. The abstract shorts of Norman McLaren seem to me the most representative. Yep, that's full formalism if you want absolutes. I hope you enjoyed rollicking around cinema's mad rebels.
Walt Disney, the greatest and only true filmmaker who starts from an absolutely clean slate.
Remember, if your sets are fake, your CGI sucks, your actors are stiff, you just tell the critics, "Silence, Philistines! It's formalism!" And since it's impossible to go over every single formalist film and filmmaker, please mention the ones I didn't mention in the comment section. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.